Dennis Gates' mentor, Leonard Hamilton, is retiring. So let's get into some coaching speculation right now on Locked On Mizzou.
You are Locked On Mizzou, your daily podcast on the Missouri Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, all you true sons and daughters, I'm John Miller, your Mizzou mafioso and the central scrutinizer of Missouri Tigers football and basketball. And on this coaching speculation heavy edition of the program, I've got more speculation about Kirby Moore, the Missouri offensive coordinator. Could he be following his brother down to New Orleans? Yes, going to get into more wild speculation on that in just a little bit. But first, I do want to start by telling you that Gametime is a sponsor of this program. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first ticket purchase. And I think listener Sam, who commented recently, I think this is a good representation of what people are thinking yesterday. With Leonard Hamilton retiring at the end of the season, are we worried about losing Dennis Gates? Well, I think this is a completely natural and understandable question for Missouri basketball fans, especially since Leonard Hamilton is an excellent basketball coach and a mentor of Dennis Gates. But I will say this, among many things I'm about to say regarding this situation, Dennis Gates and C.Y. Young as well saw really the peak of Florida State and Leonard Hamilton as well. And quite frankly, since 2021, when the Seminoles made the Sweet 16, they have not made the field of 68 since. So quite honestly, in the post-pandemic current NIL transfer portal environment, well, the 76-year-old Hamilton has not really been able to find his footing in this new environment. Not like a lot of other old guard coaches, quite honestly. Nothing really unique there. So, and there's another part of this too, which is Missouri versus Florida State as a program, say 10 years ago when Dennis Gates was with Leonard Hamilton. Well, that was a much different comparison because the Tigers were right smack dab in the middle of what was their worst period maybe in the history of the program, certainly in the post-Norm Stewart era, without a doubt. Meanwhile, Florida State was competing quite frequently for deep runs in the NCAA tournament at the same time. But again, since then, since Dennis Gates has decided to come to Missouri, and by the way, before that, obviously he was the head coach at Cleveland State as well. Well, slowly but surely, not only did Florida State's, their winning has started to dissipate a little bit, but also just the money around the program as well. Because, well, frankly, the SEC and the ACC, especially basketball-wise, have almost flipped spots in the last 10 years to the point where you look at quite simply the money involved between the former mentor there, Leonard Hamilton, and the student there, Dennis Gates. Well, it's actually the student who's making a lot more money than the teacher. Dennis Gates making a little bit more than $4 million this season with a massive buyout, by the way, too. Something approaching the neighborhood of $25 million this previous offseason. I think it went down a little bit this coming offseason, but regardless, it's going to cost you easily north of $15 million to buy out Dennis Gates. And then you're going to have to pay him north of $4 million a year on top of that. What part of Florida State's basketball infrastructure right now tells you that they're doing that? Because I would point out that it's not as though Leonard Hamilton is just resigning out of nowhere here and retiring at the end of the season for absolutely no reason. In fact, just about a month ago, 6 former Seminoles brought a lawsuit against the school accusing Hamilton of misleading those players about name, image, and likeness compensation. So what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that Missouri's NIL, especially on the basketball court, is a lot stronger than Florida State's right now for a whole bunch of different reasons. And especially, again, basketball-wise, all of the resources used in name, image, and likeness has got to be going to football. You've got to think for the Seminoles at this point. Then when you just get to attendance, back to, hey, the peak of Florida State basketball just a few years ago. Well, I found an article from the Tallahassee Democrat pointing out that actually Florida State's attendance had gone up significantly from 2014 to 2019, actually bucking the trend overall of college basketball. And yet that peak for Florida State, just a little over 9,000 people per game in 2019. Obviously, Missouri's doing a heck of a lot better than that with a building that is 15,000 people versus 12. But again, Florida State barely even filling that place up at the very peak of their basketball powers and against the best opponents in the ACC as well. Basically, unless it was Duke or North Carolina, that type of thing, they aren't selling it out. Whereas Missouri, and much more is important if Missouri's good or not. As long as Missouri is competing for a spot in the NCAA tournament, you're going to see 15,000 people in Mizzou Arena on every Saturday afternoon in SEC play at the very least. So I know Dennis Gates has tremendous respect for Leonard Hamilton, but after everything I've just laid out there, the difference in compensation, the difference in support, just in attendance, the lack of NIL infrastructure for Florida State basketball versus Missouri, which the contrast could not be more stark at the moment. Not only has Missouri done very well in the portal in basketball under Dennis Gates, especially this season, but yeah, that lawsuit, not exactly a great look for your program. Regardless of the merits of the lawsuit, that is going to slow down your recruiting game, especially in the transfer portal. So again, I ask you, if you're Dennis Gates, what is it about this job that would be appealing other than, hey, Leonard Hamilton, who I love, used to be the coach there and I had some good times there. Fair enough. I guess I would just be a lot more worried about the whole thing if Dennis Gates were actually a Florida State alumni, which he is not. He graduated from Cal Berkeley. And also he's from the Chicagoland area. He's not a Florida guy originally. So again, if you're going to make the Mike Anderson comparison, sort of similar comparison there, and he left to go coach his mentor's former program. Well, again, it's hard to compare Arkansas's basketball program to Florida State. Despite the success that Leonard Hamilton had, when you just compare the money, the level of support for Arkansas, that massive Bud Walton Arena, obviously the NIL game to lure John Calipari from Kentucky, again, there's just no real comparison there. Arkansas also a national champion in the early mid-90s with Nolan Richardson as well. Again, just a level of success that to me really isn't comparable. So I'm just going to go ahead and go out on a limb there. I don't think there's any chance whatsoever that Dennis Gates becomes the next head coach at Florida State. And not only from everything I just laid out, but again, what a $15, $20, $25 million buyout. There is absolutely no chance, in my opinion, that Florida State is going to do that. Plus, you've got some extra reporting here from Jeff Goodman. Listen, I like to make fun of Jeff Goodman, but conveniently I'll believe him here. He says on his Twitter page, quote, "Look for former Florida State player and current Sacramento Kings assistant Lucas, not sure how to pronounce that name, to be heavily involved in the conversations to replace Leonard Hamilton," a source told the Field of 68. So really sounds like Florida State already zeroing in on a candidate here, and it's not Dennis Gates. Again, realistically, it's going to have to be somebody like a 34-year-old up-and-comer, a guy who hasn't necessarily been a head coach at any type of major level yet. Dennis Gates, I'm sorry, that's just too high of a level right now for Florida State and really any team in the ACC, probably outside of Duke and North Carolina. But when it comes to Mizzou football, I have to say a recent quote from Kellen Moore has me a little bit less confident on Kirby Moore than I was just yesterday in terms of keeping him around Columbia. So yes, let's get into some more wild speculation in the coaching ranks here in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you about Gametime, because if you're looking for tickets to your next big event, whether it's a concert, a comedy show, or of course, a sporting event, finding the right ticket at the right price can be a headache. But with Gametime picks, it's never been easier. And let me tell you how it works. Just open up the app, go to your event, and filter Gametime picks. It's just one click away. For example, Missouri, Texas A&M, they're showing you basically the best deal, and it's $116 to sit in the lower corner section. If you think that's a lot of money, well, to my point, Missouri fans are into this basketball team right now, Saturday afternoon against Texas A&M. There's going to be 15,000 plus in there. Should be a fabulous atmosphere as always. And here's the best part about Gametime. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. It's said many times you can't give better than 100%. Well, Gametime just did. So if you're ready to make your next event even better, download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last-minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So quickly, I just have to say, when it comes to Missouri forward Jacob Cruz, I am ready, willing, and hoping to eat a big fat plate of crow when it comes to that young man. And if he plays like he did the last time out against Mississippi State, something like that for the rest of the season, I'm going to be eating crow for the rest of the season. But when it comes to Kirby Moore, the Missouri offensive coordinator, I have to say I'm a little bit less confident after an interesting quote from his brother Kellen yesterday, but I'm not ready to eat crow just yet, and here's why. Well, Kellen yesterday was asked by 810 Sports, Kansas City Sports Radio here. I would play the quote for you, but I don't want to run afoul of, well, a media conglomerate that is not my employer. So here's the deal. Here's what Kellen Moore was asked. He was asked about Kirby, basically saying, hey, how about Kirby at Missouri? Nice season, huh? And Kellen essentially just said, yep, he's doing great, all that kind of deal. I had some time at Missouri as well. Good deal. And then he was asked, what do you think Kirby's ceiling is? Is he going to want to be a head coach somewhere? To which his brother Kellen said, I certainly think he's ready, and he's going to have an opportunity really, really soon. And I have to admit, I detected a bit of a smirk there from Kellen Moore. And again, just to recap for those of you who maybe aren't an everyday or haven't followed the last couple days of this program, Kirby Moore, the Missouri offensive coordinator, his older brother Kellen Moore, looking very likely to be the next head coach of the New Orleans Saints. He's currently, though, the offensive coordinator with the Philadelphia Eagles. So with the Eagles in the Super Bowl, we're going to find all this out officially here in about 6 days or so, I would say. So that quote there, that has a lot of Missouri fans, including myself, kind of cocking my head a little bit and going, that was a little bit interesting. But then I got to go back and read the quote once again. Again, we're going full Zapruder film here, folks. The question again was, is he going to want to be a head coach somewhere? He wasn't asked, do you think he's going to want to be an assistant in the NFL? He was specifically asked, is he going to want to be a head coach somewhere? To which his brother responded, hey, I think he's ready, and I think he's going to have an opportunity really, really soon. So if we take that literally, take it at face value here, again, that's really just Kellen Moore talking up his little brother and saying, hey, I think he can be a head coach someday. I don't think he's thinking of, in the NFL necessarily, maybe somewhere at the college level, that type of deal. But I don't know. At this point, again, I could look totally wrong here in about a week's time, for sure. But as I'm sitting here today, I still think it makes more sense for Kirby Moore to stay at Missouri simply because for $1.3 million, which is what Kirby is going to make this season at Missouri if he sticks around, that's a decent chunk of change for an NFL offensive coordinator already. Plus, you would think you'd have to put at least that, if not a little bit more, to lure him to another job. There's probably a buyout involved there. I just don't know that the New Orleans Saints are the most lavishly spending franchise in the world, first of all. But also, second of all, I understand family loyalty and all that stuff, but I think as a new first-time NFL head coach, as much as you want to do right by your brother and all that good stuff, well, there is a bit of a risk there. If you're hiring your little brother as your offensive coordinator, a first-time job, again, Kirby has done a good job with Missouri, but he still is a relatively inexperienced guy and doesn't have any coordinator or play calling experience at the NFL level. So to me, on a financial level and also just a professional level, from Kellen Moore's perspective, I don't know. I think I might rather, if anything, I think I'd rather hire an offensive coordinator who is older than me. Kellen Moore, a relatively young guy in his own right, of course. I might like to hire somebody who's maybe a 55-year-old guy who maybe has more wisdom and experience than I do, can help me along. Maybe who's had some experience as a head coach as well, can sort of, show me all the different sticky wickets that I could potentially get involved in. All I'm saying is, as of today, I have to admit, I'm a little bit less sure on Kirby Moore than I was yesterday, but if I got to pick, I still think Moore is probably going to be back as the Missouri offensive coordinator next season. As much as I hope to eat crow on the Jacob Cruz thing, well, I hope I'm right about this Kellen Moore deal. And by the way, I realize I did mix up the Moores there. Right at the end, I meant Kirby Moore, that whole situation, of course, as it relates to his brother Kellen. But speaking of coaching, Dennis Gates had an interesting comment on a couple of levels. I thought, well, one level in particular was really interesting to me. He said the ceiling of our team has not been reached yet. That's something he said multiple times here. I think he really believes it. But mostly, the end of this quote, he says, the players have done a tremendous job over their careers, but also in this short time since June of our gathering where we started working on team building. So when it comes down to our potential, we have not reached it yet. Gates thinks he's just what he sees in practice. Again, back to the Jacob Cruz point, obviously he's seeing something in practice that I didn't always see in the games, for example. So I definitely trust Dennis Gates there. But to me, what's the most impressive thing and the biggest standout word of that quote is June. Again, most of these guys have been together since June. That was basically 7 months ago. What are we talking about here? How is this team so connected already, seemingly? You see, well, it helps to win, I will say that. But you notice after Missouri against big wins, against Kansas, against Mississippi State, the one guy puts on the headset and does an interview. Well, the other 14, 15, 18 guys, however many there are on the roster, are all got their arms around each other, just yucking it up, having a good old time. And, that's something I noticed even in the preseason is what seems like these guys are really enjoying each other. I don't know if that means we're going to be a great team, but it doesn't hurt. That's for darn sure. And the fact that this is looking more and more like a great Missouri basketball team, well, it's just all the more impressive that Dennis Gates, whatever he's got as a head coach, as a man, whatever it is that he's able to get guys to believe in each other and in themselves, it's just really impressive that he's able to build that in such a relatively short period of time. I don't know a heck of a lot of basketball coaches that could pull that off. So if you want to get Missouri basketball fans, for example, to watch more Missouri basketball, well, all you really need is a good team that wins ball games. But how do you get Missouri fans to watch more college basketball in general? I want to get into that general concept here right after these quick messages. Now, one topic for some reason over the last few years that is endlessly fascinating to me, just in terms of the human dynamic, is this idea of hardcore fans versus casual fans. And that can be in terms of sports, entertainment, just about anything has a hardcore portion of the audience that, of course, matters. But naturally, the real money is in the casual fans, or as Charles Barkley puts it, of course, Barkley's been a tremendously successful entertainer, commentator on basketball for decades now. As he put it once, he said, I have two audiences, or TNT, his basketball show inside the NBA, it has two audiences, the basketball fans, and then, again, as he puts it, the wives, the girlfriends, and the kids. And the question is, how do I get the latter? Because getting the basketball fans is almost, well, it's almost a layup, to make a stupid analogy there. And really, I just don't think you can talk about this dynamic enough in any type of entertainment, because sometimes I think right now you're looking at what Major League Baseball has done to change its rules. You look at what the NBA is talking about just in terms of, hey, what should we do to address these falling television rankings, these falling television ratings, I should say. Well, I'll just say from my perspective, I think the pitch clock, for example, in Major League Baseball, I love it. I think it's great. And while it might turn off some of the hardcore sort of traditionalist fans, I think it's good for the product. I really do. And yet I have to admit, the pitch clock in and of itself has clearly not drawn in more casual fans to watch baseball. So I have to think about this. Obviously, I am a hardcore fan of the Missouri Tigers, of Mizzou football, Mizzou basketball, also the Kansas City Chiefs, as you might have guessed, the Royals, also just the National Basketball Association in general, I'm a huge fan of. WWE, quite honestly, but everything else, I love sports. But when it comes to mixed martial arts, soccer, all women's sports, quite honestly, tennis, gymnastics, hockey, I'm a casual fan of all of that. So I have to think about that. Who have I gravitated toward in this casual fan zone? Well, recently, Caitlin Clark. My God, has she moved the needle, not only for me, but for tons of casual basketball fans and sports fans all over the country. And I think what's really interesting here about Caitlin Clark is so often the talk about Major League Baseball is, oh, why don't they promote these guys well enough? And how come they're not promoting these guys better or something like that? Well, I would point out that Caitlin Clark's rise to stardom was the most natural and organic thing I've ever seen in my entire life. It's not as though she was out there putting herself out in social media every single day. And in fact, again, it's like, why is Caitlin Clark this massive, massive star? Well, partially because she's really unique and different in basketball, but it's more than that. Because obviously there have been other guys and ladies like Serena Williams and John Jones, Simone Biles, Usain Bolt, Michael Phelps in swimming. Obviously Phelps brought a lot of people to swimming who never cared about the sport before. Tiger Woods may be the ultimate example of that. And to me, I just don't know that of all those people that I listed off, the one thing that all of them have in common is, of course, true greatness, but not every truly great athlete brings new people into the sport. Somebody like Roger Federer, who I liked in tennis, I don't know that he brought a ton of new casual fans into the sport. Same for Nikola Jokic in the NBA. As great as I think he is, for some reason, there's just not that star crossover appeal to the wives, girlfriends, and kids for whatever reason. So I don't know. I just thought it was interesting. By the way, I've talked a lot about Missouri gymnastics at times lately and how I think that sport actually has more crossover appeal, has a bigger appeal maybe than even what the SEC realizes. Well, Olivia Dunne, by the way, seems to agree with me a little bit. And I think it's interesting, her comments, basically she was saying that they think that there's too many deductions taken away in gymnastics. And she thinks the perfect 10 is something that the casual fan can understand and really grab onto. And she says, quote, "At some point it feels negative and loses the entertainment factor that draws the crowd in." Now, here's a person who understands how to build an audience. Now, unlike Caitlin Clark, obviously she very much has put herself out there big time in social media and built and cultivated a following and an audience in a different way, for sure. But my point is even that was her doing it. It wasn't as though the NCAA just decided, aha, Olivia Dunne, let's go promote her. No, it was all her, just like it's all Caitlin Clark, just like it was all Ronda Rousey back in the day, or Michael Phelps, or Usain Bolt, Simone Biles, these people who are so great at their sport, or charismatic, or good looking, or some combination of all three of those things, or even more factors. My point here is just this trying to engineer that. I don't have any great examples of that ever working. It's always these people who just naturally become stars on their own, no matter how they do it, whether it's just sort of, hey, going out there and naturally being who they are on the basketball court like Caitlin Clark, or it's Olivia Dunne doing what she does on the gymnastics stage and also on the social media stage and that platform as well. But again, nobody told Olivia Dunne, hey, here's how to become a star. She just went out and did it. So my big point here is sometimes I think sports leagues and sports fans, especially the hardcore fans, are worrying about things that don't really matter, trying to fix, change things here or there on the margins, or not change things here or there on the margins just based on, hey, this is how it's always been done. I think you've always got to have the casual fan in mind without turning off the hardcores, because of course the hardcores are the ones who are sitting behind home plate, paying for autographs, paying for the biggest experiences post-game and all that kind of stuff. So I understand all of that, and yet the casuals and just how to navigate that entire dynamic to me is it's an unanswerable question, but one that clearly I spend a lot of time talking about, and hopefully you've enjoyed me spending a little bit of time talking about it today. As always, thanks for making this show your first listen every day, and for your second listen, check out Locked On SEC on YouTube and wherever you listen to podcasts. So until next time, and I'll have a Missouri-Tennessee basketball preview for you on Wednesday right here on Locked On Mizzou.